Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 47-minute webinar. We're going to be talking about leading the development office. This is being recorded, so if you are maybe not leading the development office, but in the development office, and you need to make a mild suggestion to your boss about some alternative ways, we're recording this. It'll go up on YouTube, and you can share the link later. But we're going to be talking about just some considerations when it comes to leading the development office. One of the big reasons why I felt this was a great topic to bring up is from the consultant standpoint, the number of people that have approached me asking for recommendations for people to hire because there's seems to be a high turnover rate in the development office currently. The number of people, development officers that I've talked to who are transitioning from one organization to the other seems to be really high as well. And with the relational dynamic of fundraising, it just seems like it's above what's ideal. That turnover rate is above than what's ideal. And of course, just general leadership, we're going to apply some principles that you could utilize if you're leading anybody or overseeing any office. So I think it'll be real practical and applicable across the board. But here's the big idea that we're going to hone in on today. Wisdom when you hire is better than regret when you fire. And if you've ever had to fire someone, I'm sorry. It's not pleasant. It's not fun. Even if you've ever had someone, maybe you didn't fire them, but you had to open the door and let them leave voluntarily. That can be so heartbreaking. It seems like it's a lose, lose, lose across the board. So how can we cut down on the turnover, and how can we do a better job hiring than getting really good at firing? So firing is a part of leadership. One of my mentors told me, you haven't really managed until you've had to let someone go. And he told me that right when I had to let my first person go. And I'm like, well, I don't like this part of leadership, but it's a part of it. So
Yeah.
where are we going to be going over the next 47 minutes? We're going to take a look at hiring for the development office. We're going to do some Q&R a little earlier in this webinar than we typically do at the end. We'll pay some attention to retention, and we'll want to hear your top takeaway and give you some things that are coming up. And then we have a little gold nugget here at the end. We've already mentioned it. The big idea of wisdom when you hire is better than regret when you fire. And where I want to start off with is it's kind of like an HR fundamental, but when you're considering hiring for the development office, bringing someone onto the team, and that's step one to leading office. You got to have the people there, but you need to have a really clear definition and expectation of the job. That being said, over communicate that fundraising is, especially those mid and major gift level fundraisers, it's not a job you can do from the office. It's not a job you can do from home. This isn't a work from home position. It's not a 40 hours in the office on campus position. That person is going to have to be out in the community, going to other people's offices, going to other people's homes, meeting the potential donors, the prospects, or the donors, if donor stewardship, getting on their turf instead of staying on your turf or expecting them to come to us. We go to them. And so that's a fundamental, but I just have to start with that. Some people get into fundraising and they go, I didn't realize how much road time it was going to be, or I didn't realize how much I have to travel. Or if you enjoy the safety of an office, those large gift fundraising positions probably aren't for you. When it comes to leading the development office, we don't want to measure success by hours in the office. Now, there may be some positions that are a little more administrative that fall under the development office. We'll make an exception for those. But in general, if it's a fundraiser that we're talking about, success is not measured by hours in the office.
Hey, Aaron, I had a guy that I have just so much respect for. And he shared this really compact idea that is all over what you're saying. And it's this: there is no money in the office. So if
Mm.
your job is to get money, you're not going to find it there. And your point about where do we find it, just real quick, when I use the term National Geographic photograph, anybody have a favorite picture that just instantly comes to mind? Um, some of the best photographs ever are in National Geographic magazine. And I had the opportunity to listen to one of the award-winning photographers one time. And to distill it all down, he shared how can he be so successful? And he said, I have to put myself in the place of greatest opportunity. And so when you think about fundraising, Mark, you were talking earlier about $1 million contribution or commitment. My guess is that you didn't just hang around the office until somebody with $1 million wandered past and thought they'd pop in and give it to you, right? And so, where is that place of greatest opportunity? And it's not just being out of the office, but it's being in the intersection between money and generosity. So, anyhow, um, definitely want to leverage that whole idea.
So what you're saying is the National Geographic photographer didn't get those great pictures from in his office?
Not even AI could help him with that.
Yeah. Hey,
Right.
here's some considerations to take on when we're talking about the development office and who we would hire for the position. First of all, chemistry. There's usually a team dynamic involved, and this is one of those factors that you can apply for any hire ever. But is there good chemistry with the rest of the team? A lot of times we put chemistry as kind of a last factor, or well, if they have the competency and they adapt to the culture, then we can compromise on chemistry. But I think chemistry is one of the most important things when you're talking about hiring a person to join a team. Is there good chemistry? The second one is culture. There's going to be a culture to the organization. So that's the if someone is a great fundraiser, maybe they have good development experience, but they're not mission aligned, they're not real passionate about the mission, that's going to be a problem. You want that culture piece to be there too. What's the culture of our organization? Really, what's the mission of it? And then also what's our staff culture? What is it like to work on our team? Some cultures are very formal. You need to show up with a suit and tie. Some cultures are a little more relaxed. Some are adaptive. Like when you do show up in the office, you can be relaxed, but you show up to the prospects or the donors, you may be a little more formal. So all those things matter. And then of course, competency. Does the person have the skill to do the job at hand? And we're going to be talking a little bit about what happens if they don't. And Ken will speak into maybe how to address that. But when we think of hiring for the development office, chemistry, culture, and competency, really important factors to consider. And that chemistry piece, the reason I put it at the top is that one's hard, I think the hardest to change.
Hmm.
Competency, we can learn and grow. Culture can be adapted to. But chemistry, if you're not clicking with someone, that can be very difficult to adjust. And this isn't a real popular approach, but I think not vibing with a leader is a good reason to not take a job. And
Hmm.
I've we've all probably worked for someone who there wasn't anything morally wrong, but the chemistry, the leadership style, it wasn't there. And you can suffer under that for 12 months, but when you start measuring in years, you're probably not going to last. And that's okay. It's just a lot easier if we can identify that up front. So
Hmm.
when you're hiring, really pay attention to that chemistry piece. Now, this next slide is a quote by Jack Welch. I'm going to throw it over to Kent. You want to walk us through this one?
Yeah, so hopefully you've heard this before, but Somebody in the organization where Jack Welch was CEO of GE, and there was a there was a big push in the organization during kind of a down cycle to invest lots of money in developing people. Think about professional development. Well, so the CFO steps up. He asks the question, "What happens if we invest all this money in developing our people and they leave us?" So that sounds a little bit panicked, right? And Jack says, "Well, what if we don't and they stay? What if we don't invest in people and they stay?" So, yeah, there's a financial, you think about a financial exposure. And later on, we're going to also take a look at the question, what are the non-financial factors? And um, the, I know we're in the fundraising business and we're in philanthropy, but I think too often we either put the wrong emphasis on dollars or not enough emphasis on dollars. Dollars matter, but they're not the only thing that matters. And so when Aaron talks about culture, man, um, there's no amount of money you can spend that's going to just change the culture by itself, right? And I don't know all the people, I don't know all the organizations in the room today, but there's one in particular that it's a very solid organization, small team, but such a strong culture. And that's at City Lights where Haley is. There's no doubt that every person on that team is dedicated to the mission. And I mean, I see mission execution just oozing out of everybody. And so, even though everybody has an area to specialize in, the mission isn't a compartment by itself. It's a part of the culture that goes throughout. And they understand what it means to invest in people in ways that I think not only makes them want to stay, but adds value on an ongoing basis for them staying engaged in the organization.
One of the things that we're hinting at, and I'll just go ahead and say it, is you'll see that we're placing a value on longevity, having employees that have this longevity. They're going to stick with the organization. And while over the past couple decades, that the idea of longevity being at the same organization, lifetime, or, measuring it by decades instead of by months or years, that's shifted from the, 60s, 70s, 80s. It's shifted a little bit into the 90s and 2000s, where people tend to move around a little bit. But the nature of fundraising is so relational that the longevity is extremely important. If you have a fundraiser on your team and they build relationships with donors and they leave, there's nothing you can do to retain the personal relationship. You have to start over and build that from scratch. Now, there's some organizational relationships, some rapport with the organization, but at the end of the day, people are in relation with other people. And that's why we're having a high, kind of this undercurrent value of longevity and getting, what, like this quote on the screen, investing in the people. What if they leave us? Well, what if we don't say this idea of we want people to stay, but we also want them to be equipped, empowered, and and compensated to continue to stick with us and do the job. So the relational piece of fundraising is really important. With that being said, Kent, you want to talk about some ideas that people who are leading the development office might consider professional development and career path?
Yeah, for sure. And Aaron, when we talk about longevity, um, just for a minute, going back to the fit, um, because we have the benefit of longevity, we want to make sure that we're retaining the right people longer. And attracting the wrong people less often. And I'm not saying that wrong people in a moral sense, but for a fit with the organization. So real quick, I know we're going to do a different poll later, but real quick, I want to ask you to drop in the chat box. And there's no prize or penalty for this, but uh, as you know it, what's the average tenure of a development officer in a charitable organization? Just put a number in there. You know it, you guess it, whatever. So real quick, I'm going to open up my chat box to see. Somebody said 14 months, 3 years, less than 2 years, 18 months, 16 months, 18. Yeah. There's not that this will surprise anybody, but there's some disagreement. The research doesn't all agree, but most of the metrics say it's between 18 and 14 months. Now, that's a year and a half. Well, if that's the average, and you and I know people who've been 10, 20, 30 years with their organization, think what the low end of that has got to be for the average to be 14 to 18 months. And like Aaron was saying, we're in the relationship business. And I don't know about you guys, but I can't quickly establish a large number of durable relationships. And if you look at both sides of that equation, it takes time. And so the whole thing about personal development, career path, career growth, and I'm just going to kind of throw the retention banner over that. What are some things that really lend that direction? Well, a little bit later, we're going to talk more about kind of the monetary aspect of it. But one of the questions I always love to hear people's response to is, what is your professional development plan for this year? And I don't know if anybody has that imposed on them by the workplace. You have to have a professional development plan. It has to be approved. But whether the workplace has it or not, you should have one, right? Here's how I want to grow and stretch in 2025. So what are some ways, and I'm just going to throw some out. For me at the local and regular level, AFP, the Association of Fundraising Professionals, for me has been the single biggest professional development tool in my fundraising career. And whether it's that or something else, a place where people who are like-minded, that are kind of engaged in the same pursuits that you are, can be so helpful. Another organization, for me, this isn't a local and it's not as regular, but I'm involved. I'm a member of CLA, the Christian Leadership Alliance. And again, it's people that are in pursuit. My engagement, my face-to-face engagement, that's annual. But for me, that's a highlight. I'm also, and I'm just using this as an example, I'm a partner in an organization called ABE, the Alliance for Board Effectiveness. And these are governance consultants from across North America, so primarily US and Canada. But again, I find these people stretch me in directions that I'm not even alert to outside of that group. When I was in higher ed, I had an opportunity to serve on some commissions or committees, work teams, again of national or international organization. Those ways to be working alongside people who have way more expertise than I do, or maybe have a lot more depth in one area than another. You end up with people that you can reach out to and build on. And so then two other things that I want to mention here, we'll probably circle back to them. One of the ways that you can really grow your competency is by mentoring. And don't think either or, but think both. So who is someone that is mentoring you? You look to them as a mentor. you share that kind of language and that experience. Let somebody else on a one-on-one basis pour themselves into you. And then on the other side, who are you mentoring? Who is it that they're growing professionally and personally because of following kind of in your path or in your shadow? So mentoring, and then another one, again, this is professional development, but consulting. Is there a consultant that is helping to advance your skills, kind of your portfolio, so to speak? And then I'm going to say on this call, regardless, where are you consulting? Somebody says, I don't even want to be a consultant. That's okay. But there are opportunities where you can bring value, and you'll find that that when people are looking to you for clarity, for direction, it's just going to hone your skills. It's not going to make you smarter, but it's going to make you realize how smart you are. It's not going to give you more experience instantly, but it's going to help you validate the experience that you have. And so anyhow, those are just some, I mean, that's not obviously an exhaustive list, but those are some of the things that came to mind when Aaron and I were talking about, what are some ways that we can develop personally and chart out a path for our career and really grow.
And I'm actually gonna steal a quote from Kent Stroman. This is one that I've used for decades in staffing in general, but hire what you can't train, train what you didn't hire. I mentioned early that the chemistry piece and culture piece are so important. Competency matters, but if competency is something that you can teach or train, man, if you have someone who's got the chemistry and the culture down, but they just don't have the experience yet, and they're lacking a skill that can be taught, I would say hire that person and teach them how to do the thing, because that's how important the chemistry and culture are. And then send them to get CFRE certified or to the conferences to get the training. Continue to develop the skill and refine the skills, but hire what you can't train, train what you didn't hire. Now on that, we're gonna go. We decided to put the Q&R a little earlier in the or not podcast, in the webinar today. Because we anticipate maybe there's some questions that we want to have time to unpack or dialogue or even throw back to the group. So when you think of leading the development office, any questions out there that the audience would like to throw out, you can put it in the chat box, or if you want to raise your hand, we can get you unmuted and you can ask it or throw it out there. But we'd love to take some time just to address any questions you may have.
Well, we got Rondalyn.
Yep, hand up by Rondalyn.
Okay, I'm trying not to giggle to myself, but I'm like, where are we getting all this money from to do this training?
Yeah, great question. So before I respond to that, and Aaron, you'll have some thoughts, but real quick, by just a visual show of hands, who would say that in your budget, you have money for whether you call it training or professional development, et cetera, just by show of hands? Let's see, Rachel, anybody else? Tracy, Haley, okay. So I think that's a great example that you have to, or it has to be an organizational priority. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But if your budget today is zero, what I would encourage you doing now, don't be transparent about this, but find somebody on the board who understands the value of training and professionalism, and ask if they would fund this year's budget. Pick a number so that we can help our fundraising staff be more impactful. And so one of the questions that Aaron and I use a lot of times as we visit with people is how much money or how much room do you have in this year's budget for additional revenue? Now, just think about that for a second. By show of hands, who would say your budget has room in it this year for additional revenue? And if we're not at 100%, we've got some other work to do here, right? But the thing is, if we're going to have additional revenue, we have to have a plan for it. If we're going to have more effectiveness in anything, we got to invest in it. Now, I'm looking at Haley Kardokas because we're involved in I would call it a major fundraising campaign. Is that a fair term? One of the things I love about campaigns like that is it's a self-funding mechanism, right? So as you're raising money to build 27 buildings, you're also raising money to help you raise the money to build 27 buildings, right? It's all connected. And if ever you need somebody outside the organization to give a perspective on that, call Aaron, call me, let us, from an outside standpoint, just validate something we're going to touch on a little bit later, and that's return on investment. I mean, there's very few investments that can be made in an organization where it has a traceable and measurable impact. And so the follow-up is those investments in professional development. How does that impact our fundraising, actual dollars raised? Does that help, Rondalyn?
Sorry, yes, it does. Thank you.
Oh, awesome.
And I'll give two different ways to look at it as well. This webinar is leading the development office, but whenever I'm giving some advice for people looking for jobs, so think of following the development leader, or how to be a good follower, how to be a good employee in the development office. In that interview process, one of the questions I encourage everyone to ask is, what's the culture of growth here? If I join the team, how are you going to invest in me to become better? And if I think it's a little bit of a red flag if there's not that culture of development within an organization. It's kind of like, well, man, you better pay close attention to that. That's something to really pay attention to, because then you're going to be responsible for developing yourself. There's not going to be anyone else. But I think it's a huge green flag when an interviewee asks a question like that, and the organization can go, oh, every year we go to this conference and we expect our people to be spending X amount of hours per month, personal development. We encourage reading books. We pay for books. If you want to buy a book and read it, that's a business expense. We cover that for you. We expect you to attend 47-minute webinars, free training. You don't have to pay for those.
Of course.
Yeah, a little shameless plug there. But that's one of those culture pieces that you want to look for. And I think if you're starting at zero, there's a way to begin, and there's some things you can do for free, but building that into the culture, and that leads us a little bit into some retention topics we'll talk about later. But Kent, Mark posted a question in the chat. I will be hiring a new development director as a new CEO, currently underperforming in major gifts. Any thoughts? So Mark, this guy's he's in fundraising, he's in development now, but he's going to be somewhat promoted to a CEO position. Is that the situation?
No, I'm taking a new role as a CEO over in Pennsylvania. The development director that's been there for about 5 years just took a job with the National Big Brothers Big Sisters organization, and so that position is open. And as I've looked at the kind of performance, they have almost no activity right now in what I would consider major gifts, or at least very, very low spots. So in many ways, it's going to be kind of building a development department from scratch. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to sit in on this. It's been a minute since I've actually been in charge of the development office, so wanted to get a few thoughts and highlights there.
Before the Stromans give any perspectives, Kent mentioned City Lights. They have a great culture within their development team. Haley, would you mind just giving your 2 cents on some of the things that make City Lights culture around fundraising great, and just speaking into any thoughts that you have in addition to that?
Yeah, thanks for asking me to. I think like I just keep going back to the idea that chemistry is so important in culture, and like somebody can learn a lot. There's also just like inherent things that if somebody does not have that, they just can only go so far. And I feel like for me, our executive director has been very intentional on making sure that everybody is very well versed in the work that we're doing across all fields. Like nothing is siloed. And I will say our staff is very small. So it is like I recognize that that's easier at this point, but I do think it's so important that people on the program side have a general understanding of what's happening on the development side, as well as the development side has an understanding of what's happening on the program side, and the people that we work with and what's happening out in the community because of the funds that we're raising. Um, I also just think like I hear that underperforming in major gifts. And I think also, and I'm sure you know this, but what is a major gift to that organization right now? And maybe that gift is not what you would want the major gift to be, but maybe a smaller gift is a major gift at that point, and that can grow. So I think that that's also hopeful. Um, but yeah, those are kind of just some of my thoughts, kind of off the
Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing.
Well, my first reaction is, Mark, do you have any easy questions?
Yeah.
So none, yeah. Well, I mean, I love what Haley touched on, what she led with, and that's culture. Um, and so I don't know if anybody knows the name Gail Perry, but one of my favorite quotes, or one of my favorite practices from Gail. She's a consulting colleague. She's on the East Coast, but if she were to walk in the room right now and walk up to me, here's what she would ask me: Kent, how are you being? She would not ask me, how are you doing? And she makes a real point of emphasizing we are human beings, we're not human doings. And so, how does that apply here, Mark? Is because I believe the greatest impact is going to be as a result of who the person is, not just what they do, which is not to suggest that what we do is unimportant, but what we do flows out of who we be, right? And so, and a little bit later, we're going to talk about a culture of philanthropy in the organization and so forth. But I think the fact that you're taking such a thoughtful approach to this crucial hire is going to be rewarded. That intentionality is going to be rewarded by better outcomes, and love to maybe unpack that a little bit more on a one-to-one basis. And by the way, congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some thoughts, and I'll save those. They're actually, I have some slides coming up where I'll share some of those, but they'll be very applicable. And yeah, I think if you guys want to jump on a call, take that offline, I think that'd be a good conversation.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. I appreciate the input.
Would love it. Yeah.
I'm going to throw a poll up on the screen, and just real quick, respond to the poll. How many years have you been on staff with your current organization? 1 to 10, or in 10 can be 10 years plus, or falls within there. Kent, he did in the chat 23 years.
Oh, I can't read. I can't follow instructions.
I know these polls. So I mean, we have some less than a year, a couple in the 2-year range, 5-year range, and then some up 8, 9, and 10. Just kind of, just threw that up there just to be inquisitive. I'll share these results real quick and everyone can see there. But the reason that this is important is when we think of turnover, especially in the development office, we're going to be going here to talk about compensation and what that can look like when we give attention to retention, compensation, dollar times other. But another thing that before Kent jumps into this one is, well, I'm not going to steal your thunder because I think I know where you're going, but I don't want to take it away. So if we start talking about retention, we see on the screen there's compensation, dollar sign, other. Walk us through those real quick, Kent.
Yeah, so we're talking to those who lead development offices, right? And I think one of the things that's really hard, especially the larger the organization, is to be able to be responsible, opportunistic, and balanced in the compensation level. And so you've got the obvious, what's my actual financial compensation? What are we able to offer when we're filling that role? Think about ways that we can supplement dollars. One is time. We often ask our development staff to be flexible with their time because, like we start off, it's not an 8 to 5 job. In fact, in my experience, probably the most productive time was either before 8 or after 5. It might not have been on a Monday through Friday, but Saturday, Sunday, a holiday, etc. So look at ways to be attractive from a time standpoint. How can we be flexible? What are some other things? I wish we had more time because I would love to hear. And in fact, feel free to jot things down in the chat. What are some valuable forms of compensation that you receive or you would like to receive that aren't money? A lot of times, and I'm going to use. I've got 2 daughters. My daughters have been able to be stay-at-home moms for part of the time, but they've also been in a position from time to time where they can be in the workforce, but not on a traditional schedule. And so a lot of times we can offer something that is outside the norm that's very attractive, that's worth more than money. There's this vacation thing. Does it have to be 1 week after 6 months and then still 1 week 5 years later? Can we be more flexible in some of that? So I see some responsive comp time for sure, flexible schedule. Yeah. And then a couple other things I'll just say real quick. Attention to retention. I mentioned earlier consulting. Does your employment arrangement give you the flexibility to, let's say, engage in a couple of days of consulting a month without using vacation time to do so, and allowing you to keep whatever compensation may go with that? As a leader, what is the return on investment of what you're able to compensate? And are we self-limiting? And then another big question is, what is the cost of turnover? We talk about 14 months, 18 months, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. But here's what almost always happens. You lose your development person. They're high performing, you lose them. And you're going to bring somebody in behind them who is not as well qualified on day one as who you lost, but you're going to pay them more money. And the biggest, in my experience, the biggest cost of transition is not the additional compensation, it's the lost revenue.
Yeah.
And nobody looks at that. And does a development leader take their donors with them? No, they're not your donors. But is there a tendency for contributions in some form to tail off when we have transition? Absolutely. So calculate those things, think about those things, when we say, oh, well, we can't give you another $500 a month or whatever it is. I would say you can't afford to not do it. So again, that's kind of that longer term, larger horizon things as it relates to compensation.
Yeah, and that's a piece I was biting my tongue on. The cost of turnover is so high. If it only takes $10,000 more a year to keep someone on the team, it's it's worth it. And I know the board, especially the treasurer, doesn't like the idea of more money going out, but when you look at the alternative, that's a lot better than having turnover. And I think part of the reason I see a lot of turnover right now is there's a hesitation to pay the fundraisers well, and obviously there's got to be balance, and that shouldn't be taken advantage of. But it's kind of like the organization that says, man, we have way too many tasks. We have too many tasks to fulfill our mission to be able to hire a volunteer coordinator, because that's just hiring one person. But if you think about it, if that volunteer coordinator is going to get out there and recruit and train volunteers to do the tasks, you can't afford not to hire the person. Same thing with the fundraising. Where are we going to get this money to raise the person, or to hire the person and to give them a raise? It's like, well, if you let them go out and do their job, they're going to bring in a whole lot more money than what you're paying them. You might need to hire them plus one. Get some more people on the team.
Yeah.
Need more volunteers, get more leaders of volunteers. Need more money, get more development directors.
Man, Aaron, is it really 10:44?
It's 10:44. Hey, drop your top takeaway in the chat. As you're doing that, we have a gold nugget coming up, and so we're gonna end on a high note. But let me throw a couple things up event-wise that are in our future. The Asking Academy, our next summit is going to be in February. Mark was asking, hey, how do I train up someone, or what can I do for underperforming? Asking Academy can be a huge part of the solution there. Major and mega gift fundraising, not just for the staff, but also for volunteers. There's great results that we've had from this. Haley could speak to that too. I'm not going to ask her to, but if you want to up your fundraising game in your organization, bring a team to the Asking Academy. If you want more information on that, just put Asking Academy in the chat and we'll do that. The next 47-minute webinar is, we're going to take a focus on having a giving year instead of a giving day. Giving Tuesday's coming up, but what if we had a giving 2025 instead of a giving Tuesday? If your strategy is built around one day, you're not thinking big enough. So we're going to address that at our next 47-minute webinar. I see some.
What's the date on that, Aaron?
Yeah, it's small, October 8th.
Okay.
So about a month. We have some top takeaways in the chat. There's no money in the office. Invest in your staff for a higher ROI. I should be making a yearly personal or professional development plan and encourage my team to do the same. Put yourself in the position of greatest opportunity. It's a great takeaway. Investing in key roles, which grows the organization, funding, etc. I love the Asking Academy. And okay, great. So it looks like there's some good takeaways. Hey, here's a golden nugget. Kent alluded, he actually already said it, but create a culture of philanthropy. When we talk about leading the development office, let this culture of philanthropy bleed outside the development office and go organization wide. This can be modeled by the development office, but as Haley mentioned earlier, let the operations team know what's going on in development. Let the development team know what's going on in operations, and create an organization-wide culture of philanthropy. And one of the ways that you can do this again is at the Asking Academy. When everyone realizes they're a part of the fundraising, including the board, including volunteers, and they can come and get training on how to do that, it makes it it really puts the fun into fundraising. It makes it enjoyable. People get excited about it, and everyone wins when the organization's bringing on higher donations. And so that's the culture that we want to create. Kent, any closing thoughts on our
Man,
golden nugget?
no, you know what, Aaron? I think we could do a 47-minute webinar on this topic, creating a culture of philanthropy. And but we can't do it in the first 47 minutes. So I think I'm done.
All right. Well, it sounds like Mark and Kent are going to talk offline, but if anyone else just wants to talk shop offline, we're available. We'd love to jump on a call with you. We want to help you win. We want to help your development office win. And if that's in a formal fashion or informal, we're available, want to help out. So blessings to you and your development office and all your fundraising efforts. We hope to see you on the next 47-minute webinar.
Yeah, thanks for showing up today. This is good stuff.